Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor please yield to a question?
He will yield.
Sponsor, Section 2, subsection D, line 6, which discusses the policy to respect parental rights by ensuring that children grade 5 and below do not receive instructions through the curriculum or programs on a myriad of things: human sexuality, transmitted diseases, exploring gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation. My question is how does this bill support parents' rights who are interested in their kids' grades 5 and below to participate in that curriculum?
Gentleman from Lincoln.
I think it's pretty clear in the bill that it is laying out the policy, and that a child under the grade of 5 is not going to be exposed to that type of curriculum. After they get above that in grade level 6, they can receive that instruction upon the parent's consent.
Lady from Jefferson.
Clarifying question.
He will yield.
I read this as that they are not to receive any instruction, period, with or without a consent. Is that correct?
Gentleman from Lincoln.
Yes, that's exactly what I just said.
Okay, thank you for that
Lady from
clarification.
Jefferson, 34.
May I ask a follow-up question?
He will yield to another question.
Great. What curriculum was being taught in that elementary age time frame of 5th grade and below? Around the nature of what this bill is trying to achieve, which is to remove it. So I'm just curious.
Gentleman from Lincoln.
Some school systems set policy at what grade level they will teach some of these things, and that varies from time to time. We're just ensuring that it is not before grade 6. I will also say that if parents want their children to learn about these things below grade 6, they are more than welcome to do that at home, where it is private and where they can teach that child what they want them to learn.
Okay.
Lady from Jefferson.
My next question is can you tell me...
Gentleman from Lincoln, will you yield another question?
I'm sorry.
I will yield.
Will you yield
He
to
will
another
yield.
question, sponsor?
He will yield.
Thank you. My next question is could you tell this General Assembly and the folks watching at home the amount of how many girls and boys here in Kentucky experience sexual abuse?
Gentleman from Lincoln.
I do not have that number right offhand, but being involved in child welfare, I do know that there can be a significant amount.
Lady from Jefferson, 34.
May I speak on the bill, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So, good news. I've got those numbers for you and for everybody else in here. And there will be no surprise, since I have said probably for the 5th time that Kentucky is number 1 in the nation for child abuse, that our numbers are worse than everybody else's. So nationally, it's 1 in 5 girls, but here in Kentucky, it's 1 in 4. For boys, it's 1 in 20 boys will experience sexual abuse, but here, don't worry, it's 1 in 14. I also want to point out that the ages that are identified that children are the most vulnerable to sexual abuse is ages 7 through 13. And when you're 7, just for everybody, if you can't remember what grade your kid was in, that's 2nd grade. So my concern with this particular, I have concern with all of it, let me just state that for the record. But with this particular section, I'm concerned that what typically, from a programming standpoint, is happening for our children in this elementary age is that, and I'm looking at Jefferson County specifically since I represent District 34, one of the things is to explain why everyone has the right to tell others not to touch his or her body. And another one is also to explain why it's harmful to tease or bully others based on personal characteristics and describe examples of pro-social behaviors that help prevent violence. So I'm just curious, show of hands, who in here thinks that it's a bad idea for your kids not to know the difference between a safe touch and a bad touch? I didn't think so. Nobody has a problem with that, right? But that's one of the many bad things that this bill is going to take away. You know, people always say to me, what age do you think is the appropriate age to start talking to your kids about sex? And I always say there is no magic age. And as somebody who has been a foster parent with the state and has had way too much experience with children who have been sexually abused, the appropriate response, just in case anybody in here is asking themselves that questions with children, is at what age do you want to make sure your child doesn't get abused? Because that's when you need to start having a lot of different conversations with your kids that pertain to their bodies. You know, there's a lot of individuals, a lot of adults in this room that talk about how harmful this is to our children. But our kids are not crying the same fears that the adults in this room are. I've had a lot of kids come through my house, a lot of different ages. I've been involved with a lot of different schools. And I talk to kids, and I know what's concerning them. And never once in my life has a child told me that they have a problem with a classmate who's sitting next to them who maybe is trans. Kids have a lot of things to be concerned about, and we clearly have a mental health crisis before us that nobody in this body is denying, and it is specifically targeting our younger people. But this isn't it. This isn't what our kids have to worry about. So I would just ask this body to please pause and ask yourself, what are we really trying to accomplish here? We haven't really passed any sort of meaningful legislation that protects children. And in fact, there was I think a bill yesterday or maybe the day before that came, I believe, from the Senate side, and it was specifically around sexual abuse to protect children. We had 6 people in this body vote against it. So that's weird to me. I find that so bizarre that people say one thing and then their actions completely fall out of line. This is so disturbing that we have spent this much time and energy and hatred towards a small percentage of Kentuckians, and to make it worse, it's children. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times on this floor about wanting to protect children. Clearly, we need to protect our children from some of the individuals that are in this room that are voting for hate. You are voting to compromise these individuals' lives, their well-being, the well-being of their parents who have to care for them. Has anybody in this General Assembly ever had a child be so depressed that they were suicidal? That you've had to take them to a facility and check them in for their own safety? I have 3 different children that I have had the honor and pleasure of caring for. And it is hell for those children, and it is hell for the parents who are watching them struggle. And that is the invitation that this body is extending to those families and those children, to sit in hell and to struggle. Because we think we know what's best for your child. I don't see anybody in here making child support payments to me. I'm responsible for my children, and in fact, I've taken on the responsibility for other children whose families were in crisis because it's the right thing to do. Not because religion tells me to do, but because I'm just a human being who's compassionate. And I have a place that's safe for children to land and to be safe and to be loved and to be accepted for exactly who they are, with no judgment. You know, I heard it say earlier on the floor that this came about really quick, and it did. And we've tried to do a lot of things to point that out, and unfortunately we have failed. But people can see that we are fighting for you. And I think it's important to say, to restate what was said, that the process in which this content came to us is not up for debate, only the content of the House committee sub before us. And I just think everybody should stop and think about that, whether you're sitting in this room or you're at home listening. It's not important how we got here. Just that we're trying to push some real hate through this house real fast. Not only is this a horrendous bill, but the manner in which it arrived on the floor is wrong, and the taxpayers are not paying us to behave and act this unprofessional, this unethical, in this manner where they want us to come up here and focus on policies that are actually affecting them and hundreds and thousands of other Kentuckians. They want they want policies that don't promote hate and legislation that actually affects a lot of Kentuckians. But instead, we are wasting the taxpayers' money focusing legislation on hate, specifically for children, 1% or less of the Kentucky population. So I hope that people think about that when elections come up. This is your house, is what we always say to people when they get here. And you have a responsibility as a representative. You're representing 45,000 people in your district. And I can't tell you how inundated my inbox was with people begging me, people definitely inside my district, but people across the state who took the time to reach out. And all the polling says that we don't support it, but, you know, who cares about that, right? We like to poll on things and then just ignore Kentuckians. Well, I'm here to tell you that Kentuckians are smarter than you're giving them credit for. And they're going to wake up, and they're going to do the best they can to start paying attention and not be distracted by shiny little objects like this legislation of hate, and they're going to start to vote you out. I said this when I spoke against House Bill 470, which has conveniently been crammed into this bill now, and I will say it again. To our LGBTQ youth and adults, we see you and we love you, and you're perfect just the way you are. And come for our jobs. Thank you.